We're going to talk a little bit about framing today. Framing is super important in Enovo because framing is really one of our most powerful sales tool. We sell weeks at Enovo, and so it is our unit of measure for all projects, for cost, for the price of a project. And so if we can get the framing right and kind of decide, hey, the appetite is 2 weeks, this is what we're planning to do. Here's the problem we're solving. Here's the outcome. Here's what we're not doing, and kind of clarify that and put an appetite on it. It's essentially a sellable unit at that point. And so everybody is going to be part of the shaping process, whether you're a developer, designer, you're helping manage a project, everybody's going to be part of that because this is sort of our mutual agreement of how the project's going to go. In previous times, we went and in other agencies, typically, a project manager sits with a client and they get a laundry list of like all the requirements. We write it up in this massive document. And then we try to work with the developer internally and figure out, okay, how many people are we going to, I mean, how much time is this going to take? And we try to guess at random estimates. And then we say, okay, this is 182 hours, we think, based on all these random guesses. And then we try to bring that in a huge contract back to the client, and we sign off on this thing. It takes a week or two to go back and forth. And finally we lock in, okay, cool, they're going to give us all this money, 50% upfront, or it's like 30%, then 30%, then whatever, 40% of the budget. We don't do any of that. We create like a unit of sales. So we say, hey, there's a 2-week thing. It's going to cost X. And then to make everybody agree to that, like we have the client pay the whole 100% up front. So they pay for it right up front. They buy those 2 weeks from us. And then we essentially buy those 2 weeks from you guys, whoever's doing the work. So it creates like a nice unit of measure as far as how we're going to all speak the same language, because there's different dollar amounts and all that. But if we talk about weeks, the clients know how much that week is. You guys know how much week, and we all kind of know what's possible in a week. And so that's really around like sort of the appetite and why the appetite's important. The framing process is really important. We've been learning from Ryan. There's other training on that. I'm going to try to summarize it a little bit here. But the framing is important because to me, this is the thing we do before we sell the project. We frame something up, we sell it, and then when we get into it, that's when we start to do the shaping and breadboarding, and we get mock-ups and prototypes. So that's kind of really on that uphill part of the project. But framing is what happens before we sell it, and we don't necessarily do any work. There's some work, but to me, it's like potentially an hour or two. It's one meeting with a client, maybe framing it up into a document, sending it to the client to confirm if this is correct, enough for them to say yes, and then them to agree to do the project. So things that are not part of framing, like necessarily building out a task grid, breadboarding, mockups, you can do those things if you think it's going to help make it more concrete. But really, this framing piece is really like the part before we do the work. It's just kind of saying, hey, I think there's a problem here. Here's kind of what the appetite, here's what we think it's going to cost. Do you want us to go work on it? Because the shaping is really where it's going to get really much more clear. And as you guys know, the shaping takes a lot of work. Like it is multiple hours sessions, either with the client or with us internally. It's typically doing it as in pairs. And there's a lot of work that goes into that piece of it. And so that's kind of how we would kind of distinguish between framing and shaping. And we didn't do framing until recently. And to me, this is sort of the magic piece, because once we figure out how much work shaping actually is with the breadboarding and do the sketches and building out a task grid, figured out how much work all that is, we can't do all of that work, because that really is it's a 25%, a third of the entire project is doing the shaping and the breadboarding. You get really deep into it. And so we're going to keep that as sort of inside the project post payment, right? So let me jump in. I'm going to share a couple slides here. Let's see how this works here. Let's make this a little bigger. Sorry. All right. Why? Nope. Stand by. We'll edit all this out. I was getting fancy with the settings earlier. Oh, here, I'll just do that. Perfect. Okay. So I love this quote. It's like Ryan said this in one of our talks, that framing is not about deciding the solution. It's very specific about that. We're just defining the situation, and then we can decide decide what kind of solution we should be looking for. So we're figuring out things like what's actually happening, where's the friction or the frustration, like why is this worth solving? And actually have a a list here at the bottom. I'll share this in the notes and stuff, but here's some like really good questions we'll get into that we can be asking. And so like it's just being curious. If you can summarize it down to like it's not skeptical, it's being curious, like with the problem and saying like, okay, why is this an issue? Okay, great. Why now? Like why? Okay, you've had this frustration. You're using a spreadsheet for this particular task. What's wrong with the spreadsheet? Like why? Oh, well, because sometimes the data is inaccurate. Okay, so there's some accuracy. Okay, why does that data get inaccurate? Oh, because people are manually entering it. Okay, you can keep, it's basically just asking, being really curious and asking deeper questions to get to the why behind this. Obviously, like a bad result of this would be like, the framing is not like we don't have a mobile app, we need a mobile app. No, the problem with that would be, hey, we have, people in the field and the website isn't reliable. We need an app that integrates with a camera and a thing and a barcode scanner. It's like so kind of explain the problem. We don't really go to like the solution of what it is. That would be something we do in the breadboarding, is to figure that piece out. I mentioned this as well, why it's important. We bill by the week. And so that's why we want to figure out how much time does the client want to spend, and how much time do you think it's going to take? It's those two kind of pieces that we need to keep, in sync as a team between the client and that's where we don't want to have this kind of extra layer of sort of like the old school like management layer where we're the ones talking to the client and then we'll come back and we'll talk to the person doing the work. No, you're the builder. We put everybody in the room and we like figure out what it is. And so, if we get the framing wrong, obviously, and we need to, the framing is going to be too vague for some clients, right? Because clients want to kind of like see the thing. They want to see the mock-ups. They want to see, the beautiful kind of end product of what it's going to look like, and they'll kind of buy into it. But we have to keep it back to the framing. And what is the framing we agree to? That's the only thing we have, sort of contractually like agreed to, is the framing piece of it. The breadboarding, the shaping, and the actual work itself is very flexible within, as long as we stick to kind of the frame. So getting it wrong, obviously, we can create scope problems later. And so that's not the optional play. It's basically how we kick off the whole process. So this is actually not correct. But if we would start with the project, hey, inbox, clients on a meeting, they say, hey, great, I have this idea, I want to do this. Okay, that's immediately kind of a cue to start making a quick little framing doc for this. And what I do is, if we're in a brand new FigJam like this, what I've been doing is this is something Ryan showed us as well. Just come up with 3 little sections. It's the problem and it's the outcome. And then we also just list down here, what is it, not going to be. And those are kind of our 3 little buckets. And so when we start, I typically do this in real time on the call with the client, because all of a sudden it gives us all something visual to look at, because we have clients where there's 2 or 3 people on the call and someone says, you know what, I've been thinking, and like, this has really been a problem over here. I immediately pull up FigJam, and also just a completely blank, empty white FigJam. Unless you guys are already in the meeting and you're already looking at some stuff in FigJam, just pull it off to the side. But sometimes just like a clean blank slate is very refreshing for everybody's brains. So you can pull in here and you can start asking those questions. Okay, like, why is this a problem right now? Oh, well, we maybe like we just hired 20 new salespeople. Okay, well, that's interesting. So that's more of a note of sort of the background and the context of this. But why is that really a problem? Oh, well, we have new employees like who find the current system hard to use. Okay, so they may say that, we may note that. It's not really a problem. It's kind of a interesting note, but we can say, okay, what's hard to use? Oh, well, the buttons are too small. Oh, well, this. We keep drilling down to like, what's really the thing? Oh, well, actually, it's when they hit this button, it doesn't actually do the thing they want it to do. Okay, so there's like missing piece in the process. So we kind of keep asking really good questions. This can be done in a few minutes. This is not hard. So what we need over here is like an easy to use, system for new, employees to quickly get, X report out of the system or whatever the tool is. You guys get the idea. And then what it's not is like, well, we're not changing this, we're not changing that, we're not, whatever, adding all these things. This is helpful to kind of use like kind of a carving knife to like cut out the things that are not going to be a part of this project. And so this is the little tool I would use, like kind of when we have that. I like to capture it right in the call with the client live. Or if it's something, you know, just so we initially kind of get to see, okay, there's generally a thing here that looks like that. Is that something you guys would like us to go frame up? Then that could be something we do after the call, or we sync up, you know, with, you know, one or two of us on the team and try to figure out, okay, is this a 1 week appetite, 2 week? And I would actually, you know, I've been putting like the title, this is, you know, fix, you know, broken, you know, onboarding, you know, process for X or whatever. And I would just put in here, you know, what do you guys think? Like, is that like a 2 week problem? Because and as you guys do this, you'll kind of be looking at it and kind of have some ideas of what the solution might be. But this would be a good time to say, like, is this a 1 week, you know, 2, 3, 4, just having it on there and being a little bit like showing that to the clients, they kind of know what we're talking about. That sometimes helps change the whole frame, as we've learned with Ryan, is like shifting the appetite down to 1 week. All of a sudden, like, you know, it kind of gives the people who are building it, right, and the people who want the thing built much more clarity. So there's people paying for the thing, there's people building the thing. We get a lot more clarity. A couple, if you only have a week, I have to do something simple. I'm going to change the side of the buttons and add a couple things here. You got me, give me 4 weeks. Like, yeah, we're adding all kinds of new stuff, you know, to it, and we can solve a much bigger problem for 4 weeks, or solve it very differently. So it's helpful to have that up front, even if it's wrong. You know, just put like, even like, hey, I think it's 1 or 2 weeks. Yeah, that sounds about right. Cool. This would be a good starting point to go like kind of capture everything on the call live with the client. And then this could be something we turn into something more of a presentation. So we'll get into that in a minute. So we frame it first, just talk about sketching it. Yeah, TADOP, all that. We just went through that. And so we don't want to like mix the shaping into the framing doc, keeping it very, very simple. I know we've been experimenting with different templates and stuff. I'll show you some that I think are working well here, and just really taking basically this same idea, maybe throwing the appetite as another section, and then it's really those 4 sections just in that. And that's what, when I say like a framing doc, that's what we would call like our Notion project docs. So when you go into Notion, you look up a project, that first page that shows up, if you want to have additional stuff, that's where you can create sub pages and organize it however you want. But that's typically what we would share with the clients, because it's got the appetite there. It gives people sort of that high level overview of what this thing is. And you can kind of add tasks and sub pages and things to it from there as well. So I'm keep going down here. I said some red flags, right? Red flags. We need a mobile app. Why is that bad? Well, that's a solution. It's not even, it's barely even in the shaping piece of it, right? It's more just some solution. And the problem is that you'll find this, the more clients you work with, the more you'll find that the clients love talking solutions, right? It's actually much easier to talk solutions because it's tangible. It's like, oh, well, this competitor has a mobile app, I want a mobile app. Or they have this feature, I want this feature. They just talk about, let's just go straight to this. Or I saw this in another app and I want it to be like Facebook and I want it to do X. So kind of backing out of that and keeping it, being sort of a good red flag is like, that's a solution. Cool. Let's try to get to why they think the mobile app. So questioning, again, be curious about why the mobile app. Could it be a mobile website, for example? Could we just make the current web app responsive? Like, there's a lot of ways to get there. Also, you immediately hear someone, if you're building it, you guys hear, oh, we need a mobile app. You should, alarms of like multiple 6-week projects just went off in our brain, or one very small 6-week project. So you can say, hey, yeah, we can talk mobile apps. However, like you're talking multiple weeks, 6 weeks, maybe 2 6-week cycles, whatever, to get a mobile app. So what I want to do is try and save you as much money and time as well. They may not want to wait 2 or 3 months to solve this problem. They just thought mobile app might be the solution, right? So we're kind of like helping them, like, cool, yeah, I don't know if you need a mobile app. What if we got a 2-week responsive version of the web app? Oh, okay, yeah, that's actually all we need. Because we're kind of getting back to the question of it, of why are we doing this, and kind of back to that problem. So, and like general stuff, right? The user said this important, or these 3 people came into a support desk and complained about this problem. That's not a problem of that. We wouldn't put that in the problem bucket of like, oh, there's been some support requests. Okay, noted. Like you have people, some your users thought this, this is a problem. You kind of have to get deeper into it. So, and then like getting into wireframes, I say this, we did this literally yesterday with a client. And sometimes wireframes are helpful, or V0 mockups. It can be helpful just to help have the client get their thoughts out on paper of what they're looking for. But you shouldn't be doing wireframing in this steps. Worst case, you're over here and you're like, cool, so if we had like a thing with like a list, like would this be cool like that? But this is really getting into shaping, or just something simple like that. And hey, when you click this, like this changes. Okay, cool, great. Again, to me, that's noted, delete it. Like that was it was just for a quick illustration, just to help communicate something. It's not like this now goes into the official, Notion documents, and then when it comes back, it's like, well, why is the list on the left and not on the right? Or why is it a drop down versus a menu? You just want to give yourselves like a lot of flexibility later in the shaping process, because we don't know if that list is necessarily the right solution at the framing stage. We're going to know it once we get deep into breadboarding and shaping and getting really close to the problem. So this is, I think, from shape ups, is we don't ask how long will this take, we ask like how much time are we willing to spend. That's from the book. It's kind of reframing this thing of like, not it's going to take 2 weeks or it's going to take 4. You kind of start with like, how big a problem is this? Because that kind of helps dial the level of intensity on this problem piece right here. Is like, is this a 2-week problem? Is this a, look, if we solve this new feature, like I'd bet 6 weeks worth of money and time on that, because it's just like so critical to our users that we get this right. Or most of the cases, it's like it's 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, something in there, some variation. So again, you guys know this appetite shapes the solution. It can helps give you guys like the frame of like what to put in there, and it brings it back to a business decision, not technical. Because once you go to giant project requirement docs and all that stuff, it gets so technical so fast. Now there's nothing for the clients to like adjust. They kind of feel out of control with it. It just feels like we could just be making stuff up, or we're having a very highly technical conversation about scope because we want to use this one tech stack, and it gets super. I mean, some of these project requirements, and I know this because like we did some of these in, early on in our agency. You guys have probably seen some of these that could be 10, 20 pages worth of notes and details. And the problem is you have to actually like make sure all that stuff actually happens. So it's quite a nightmare. I mentioned the framing for communication, just helping them get clarity, right? Like that's the main thing that shaping and framing and all this stuff is just bringing clarity. When we're doing client communication, it's like, hey, they had this idea. We're now like getting really clear about it, because most of the founders and clients we're working with, they are visionaries, and they're going to have ideas in their drive, in the shower, wherever. And they're going to go from like, hey, I had this idea, to can you guys go build it? And the framing piece is just like, cool, let's like really think about and talk about this idea. Like, why do you had this idea? Clearly there's a problem behind the idea of why you thought this would be worth bringing up. Because then again, they probably had an idea for a solution, like, oh cool, we're going to build a mobile app. That's the coolest thing. And visionaries and founders typically like, they kind of like, there's this awe and wonder of their most amazing idea, right? I just start with everything like, this is probably a terrible idea, right? Just assume it's the worst idea and just move, kind of reset it. You don't want to say that, but just like, you kind of want to have this skeptical view of like, okay, that's one idea. Like that's one way to go about it. But kind of get back to like, what's the real thing of why this is important? Because they kind of went straight to solution. So there's a bunch of question mark, unknown, problems that are sitting behind the scenes that they haven't explained to you. So that's, once we can kind of get the problem, why is this important? Oh, well, and if you keep going, why, like you can keep asking why over and over again, like, but why, like keep going deeper, deeper, deeper. And it's going to get something very tangible. Like, well, this is like causing us to lose revenue over here because we don't know this number in this report very well. And if we knew that number, it would help our business, because now we can get more profitable, which means we're going to be around longer, which means we can pay our team better, et cetera. So you really get down to like almost the more of the heart behind, like emotion of it, which is kind of funny to think of in technical terms. But there's, for these these founders specifically, there's something like very deep in there that's motivating them typically. So I didn't mean to sound like we're dismissing this like kind of idea, because there's something they just haven't thought about it as almost like a therapist, like kind of going layers and layers deep in this, like kind of asking them like, why is that important? Like, how does that affect the business? Those questions we will have at the end. I'll put those there. Okay, tools, FigJam. Obviously, we love to use that. We kind of standardize on FigJam. It's easier. Everybody should have an account, and we can share things much more easily. The ShapeUp GPT, this training, all of Ryan's training, all of like the entire book of ShapeUp, a lot of Ryan's blog posts, all preloaded into this ShapeUp GPT. So you could actually take a piece like this, and let me bring this back here real quick. There we go. Let's pull it up real quick so you guys can see this. Cool. And let's do that. Cool. So you could, this is a very bad example. I may take one that we did. Let me do a slightly different one. I'm trying to do this a little bit live with you guys. So we did this one for King's Loot yesterday. So let's just go in here. I'm just gonna so there's this project, and they had this, and I'm just gonna screenshot this and say, help me create a framing doc for this. And I would just also say like who the client is, because we do load in like all that. So it will sit there and it'll build out those different processes. Obviously, I've given it very little context. So the more we can create here, I give it more. So it's pulling a bunch of random stuff. It's perfect. It just hallucinated on its first demo. But okay, no, it kind of is generally sticking. It's combining a few different projects here. I'm wondering why it did that. Okay, it's using some other old data for that. But you more context you give it. What I would typically do is build it out in Notion, write it long form, and then bring that plus maybe the FigJam piece into it and just get it clarified. I could even just tell it like, hey, don't bring in other projects. But it's part of the problem is it knows so much about all the other tangential like projects that King's Loot's working on that it's trying to be helpful. So framing docs, Notion template, obviously that's very helpful. And then this is it. Yeah, I think the questions are the most helpful. What's not working the way it should. These are just helpful questions to have kind of on a printed out like next to your computer when these happen. But really it always boils down to like different angles of figuring out the same thing. So like also great questions if you're not a super social person and you have questions, like just being curious is like the most interesting thing. If you're in a social setting and you just want to like be engaging with people, like just ask questions, be curious about their thing. Like, oh, this person's getting their pilot's license. That's amazing. Like, why are they doing that? Why now? Like, what made you think of doing this? Like, just asking really good questions makes you a pretty awesome human being in general. So some of this stuff is like technical, but others just like, yeah, just this is how humans communicate well, as we kind of are curious. And so just defining things like, yeah, I said, what's the real friction, right? Obviously figuring out what's the pain behind it. Why now? Like, did something change? Like, oh, we just hired these employees, or we just hired a new sales manager and now this has become a problem. Who feels the pain the most? Is this like a user thing, client? Is it the team behind it who's running it? What are they doing today? And like, how does it fail? Because like they're probably making it work. We have pretty successful clients we're working with right now. Like this is not like holding back their entire business. They're somehow making this work somehow today. Okay, I'm using a spreadsheet and we have this very this terrible process, but it kind of works actually. If we solve this, like what would look different or feel different? Is this one problem, or is there like lots of little problems? This is a great thing. Being able to, this is just a skill we'll have to learn by doing it a lot, is like people will come in with their different problems. And I did this yesterday, is like, see, we were talking about one giant thing, and then I kind of pulled it into 3 different projects like that. So that does help just to kind of zoom out a bit. And I would take it like this and be like, okay, yeah, actually sounds like you have something else going on here too. Let's talk about that real quick. And I would just say like, oh, we also need to like fix the, broken export, report thing or whatever. And then just start to reframe this one up as a new project. Also, you're like, yeah, that when we're done with this, like maybe that's 2 weeks. And then you can kind of zoom out and be like, you know what, that's interesting because that's like 2 weeks. That's 2 weeks. So we're looking at like 4 weeks to kind of get both. Which is one of these more important than the other? Because now you're kind of like framing the framed projects, right? Like, cool. Like, okay, actually this one's more important. I would just do this. Like, cool, let's put that at the front. Cool. So if we did this first for 2 weeks and we came to that, does that sound good? Yeah, actually that's really good. Then they may start talking immediately about a third project, right? Because this is some of these things, like once you get on this process, they're like, well, let me share everything that's painful about my app right now with you, kind of get on a roll. And this doesn't have to take long. This is not a, there's shaping meetings, which are like, to me, 90 minutes to 3 hours. Like they're pretty long. These could be done on a 30-minute check-in call with a client, and definitely no more than an hour. This does not need to take long to do. So I was just saying, yeah, this one problem or bundle of problems, pulling it apart to like lots of different things is helpful. It's much, much better to have a 1 week project here and another 1 week and another 1 week than to have like a 4 week mushy, like I think there's like 4 different things going on. Just pull it into separate things. Like if we fix the report, fix the onboarding process, and we did this, okay, those 3 things get done, that's 3 weeks. That's much more clear and easier. And there's no cost savings. I think that's one thing I spent a lot of time with clients recently is actually explaining that, like, because they don't necessarily know how the tech works or how code works. So we end up spending a lot of time saying like, hey, so if we do it in 3 steps like this, it's not 3 separate projects. And because then they see like number of projects equals more money. It's not that. It's like, it's going to still take 3 weeks. It's just, we're going to do them in bite-sized pieces. And actually that's, if anything, is going to save you money because we can do this one thing, fix the reports. We can do this one thing, fix this other thing. So that's good. Bundle of problems. And then what's not being said, trying to get, again, the questions they're not asking. And it's typically when it still sounds vague, or you haven't really had this aha moment of like, oh yeah, no, I totally get it now. Yes, this has to be something we do next. They haven't got to that root thing. You can keep asking that. Like they probably haven't said something yet. And then any constraints like timing. Oh, we have a launch on 2 weeks. We have this. Like these are all helpful things to note for context for that frame, because those are things to put around. So I think that's it. This is sort of how our new template is going. This essentially talking about the problem. Just bullet points are very good, helpful here. Should be able to, that anyone on the team could pick this up, on the client's team, on our team, can pick this up and know what this is. And the outcome, again, we're not saying we're going to build a mobile app. We're just the desired outcome of, hey, I need this problem solved, or when I hit this button, I need an export that has these 3 things in it so I can tell this number. Like measurable things, like we're going to take it from 5 steps to 2 steps, or we're going to cut, the number of steps in half. Well, see, again, we'll have a dashboard. Okay, no, we don't have to have a dashboard. We just need to know, somehow you need to know this number. It could be emailed to you. It could be texted to you. It could be displayed on the dashboard somewhere. It could be, there's 1,000 ways we could get you that number, but we just need to show like, hey, the client needs to know this number or this formula or whatever this thing is. And then not doing just, being super clear, like we're not going to do mobile. We're not going to do any UI redesigned for this. We're not, being just very clear. And most of the time, once we get to this layer, that's where a lot of clarity comes for the client, because there's a lot of expectations. They assume this is like expectation. Our first lesson was on like communication. It's all the same thing. It's like they're thinking like this big project. We come in with like, oh no, it's just, they think it's like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 size, and we come in with like a 3 or 4. And then what happens is we get into the project and they have these massive expectations, and then we're delivering something down here. And there's just this huge gap that we have to manage now throughout the project. So the sooner we can be really upfront and be like, kind of give them all the bad news up front, not having any surprises, and being like, so just so I want you to repeat this back to me, that you're not going to get a mobile app. You're not going to get a dashboard. You're not going to get okay, cool. All super clear on that. Great. What we are going to get is these things. And if we just got those things, and then there needs to be a little level of trust where we then go into shaping together. And I think a lot of that can be done with the client, of then thinking like a bunch of ways to go now solve this problem. And constantly, like almost at the beginning of every meeting, come back, hey, just for context, just remember, this is the problem we're solving. Here's a solution. If we're in a multi 4-week project, beginning of every check-in call, we typically like to do weekly check-ins. Just bring it up for a second. Bring up the pitch doc in Notion. Be like, cool, just remember, here's the 3 problems we're trying to solve. Here's the desired outcome. So now you can see kind of where we're at on that. Now we have this page, we have this thing, we have this piece. Kind of bring it back to like, you see how we're solving these problems? Great. Just kind of bring them back, because guaranteed, like we in longer projects, a couple multi-week projects, we will forget what we wrote in that framing step, and the clients have long forgotten all of it. Like they don't even like they would have to go find that link to Notion somewhere in their email. They're not going to it. It's not like they're pulling it up every week before the call. Like, cool, I've remembered. So doing a little bit of this work, assuming just that everybody's very busy, helping in a way. You're kind of like framing the call, right, with like a little bit of like, remember the frame doc, cool, now everything we're going to talk about in the next 25 minutes is going to be what we shaped, what we framed kind of in the first 5 minutes. So that just, it gives people boundaries, keeps people like kind of idea of where this conversation is going to go. Because also they may look at that frame doc and be like, you know what, that actually, there's actually this new problem that we now see. Okay, cool, let's like whip out FigJam, have a little like session where new problem, new outcome. Is that something you guys think you would want us to work on next month? Great, got it. I'm going to note that. We'll circle back with like